And we're live. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. And we're talking about how can we correct our status. There's been so much talk going on about status correction. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that I'm concerned about that because I have been getting mixed messages. Don't mind my hair, just washed it earlier and it's kind of standing up there. And we are letting it completely get dry here. Okay, once again, I am talking about how can we correct our status. Now, I've heard a lot of conversations on status correction from a standpoint of looking at our nationality. I'm not going to be coming from that perspective today. I'm going to be coming from more of a biblical theology basis and looking at character from common law, the natural law. And the natural law comes from a theology of the basis of the Bible. And I'm not a Bible thumper. I used to be, but I'm not. But I'm going to be talking to you from morality. And I don't think you have to be a member of any congregation to have morality, iwapelu, good character, good conduct, understanding that morale is very, very important in a court of law because how you may be perceived as if you are a thing, like the courtroom wants to perceive us as a thing, as a vessel that is perhaps abandoned our vessel and that we have gone ashore and left our vessel. And because we've left our vessel, we've gone stark raving mad out of our mind, they think, and that they must possess our vessel and they must occupy it. Well, we've got to correct them. And that is the status correction that we have got to do. First, we got to address ourselves, do a clear assessment on is our morals right, are our character right, character's position right? Do we have a character problem? Do we have a credibility problem? We've got to go in on ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. And we've got to go in strong on ourselves because remember, when we go into these courtrooms, we are nothing but a thing to them, and we've abandoned our vessels, and they think they have the pure right to possess our vessels and to treat us like a thing. Now, I want to say for the record that African Americans used to be very moralistically astute. We were very conscious of our morals and making sure that our credibility was right on the money because we worked in people's houses where we were constantly being challenged of our character. Did you do this? Are you lying? Are you telling the truth? So we were always on our toes about keeping good character and good conduct. And this was up until the 60s. And after the 60s, where they had us on the black codes, we lived by the law and we stayed consciously doing the right thing. So therefore, they did not have to lock African Americans up in the 60s. There were very few people that were people of African descent that were in prison. Now, there was a lot of white men who were going against the law and challenging the law, but not a lot of black Negroes. Until after 1968, then we start filling and maxing out the prisons. Now, why was that? Was it because that we lost our morality and that freedom of peonage or slavery gave us the option of doing just like Mr. Enforcer? So we challenged the system. But when we went into the courtrooms, we were told that there is no amount of laws that the white men would acknowledge or accept when it came to the Negroes. So, in essence, we didn't have the same laws, did we? No, we didn't. The Constitution didn't even include us as one of the citizens. So, we weren't naturalized. We had no naturalization. And we didn't even know this. We were acting on the premises that we had citizenship and a right to everything. In that 13th Amendment, they took everything back. And they replaced the 13th Amendment, I understand, 2 to 3 times and changed it. So it doesn't even read the same thing that it initially read. And that has been altered. And I was under the impression that no amount of editing could change any of those amendments or articles of incorporation. But nevertheless, it was discovered in the Dred Scott decision in the case that they had no standings because Dred Scott was not a citizen. So must we first define when we go into a courtroom? We must define standing. Do you have standing over me? Am I in the right venue for you to even hear my case? But we never acknowledge that. And we go on and we never ask them about the venue. They must establish venue and personal ability to ascend to them actually questioning you. And then they must look at, did I give them consent? Did I consent by following the directions that they may give me? And those things have to be defined in the court of law. But yet we are giving our full consent to someone and saying that they have standings when they don't. But you must understand, when you're a morally unjust person and they're not morally unjust, you can say that you can object to their moral standards and the fact that they have no prudency and the fact that they are corrupted morally. And then you can call them on their standings as to whether or not they have the ability to talk to you knowing that you're a morally unjust person. But the first thing we have to do as a people is to make sure our standards of morality is correct, our character is correct, and our prudency is correct. And then we do a challenge and a cleaning of our own self, then we can rightfully stand before the courtroom and challenge them on whether or not they have venue and personal ascending. And if they don't, then literally they have to lead us on out the door because they first must establish standing. You have standing in the court of law to speak to me in that manner. And because I am of the mindset that I'm not corrupted or I am not scrupulous, then you have no right to speak to me because of your inability to be morally correct. And we can challenge them on their morality, that we don't accept their morality or their standings. But we must understand that African Americans have to do a very thorough cleaning now. And we have got to practice moral behavior and come correct. But in so many times, we have failed to look at our communities and how they have digressed and deteriorated, and how we're being seen in the media and on television is a disgrace. We've got to correct that. We've got to correct our status, and we've got to make sure that we are being morally shown on these screens and operating in a more Iwa-Pelu status. And that is good equity. And we're building equity when we develop good character, because we become morally bankrupt when it comes to having morals in our corner. We've got to talk to our young youth about making sure that they don't digress and destroy the moral character that we've built up for ourselves, and that we must go back to our individual groups of people who are setting precedents for us and giving out a wrong moral disposition. Then the courtroom will begin to see that we're a full vessel in our full presence, in our full self. We are not a thing, but an individual. They think we've gone buck wild crazy and we are out of our mind and we're not in our proper standing. And they think we've abandoned ourselves to the point where we're corrupted. And when they think that we've abandoned ourselves, they think they can come in like a thief in the night and take possessions of our vessels. But we cannot continue to abandon our disposition on things. We must have an opinion and a correct and moral opinion. And we cannot disface ourselves in the community, because when we come into the court of law, they will see us as nobody and as a vacant vessel which has been abandoned. And when abandoned, ship has been sitting there long enough without anyone caretaking it, if someone else, like Mr. Enforcer, steps in to take over and caretake our vessels, then they think they have rightful position to our vessels. Now, why has morality gone down the drain so much? And why has Black people been at the brunt of every disposition of morality? It's because when we do a thing, we go overboard. And we've got to understand that we're not trying to get the acceptance of the public. And we're not trying to outdo every race of people. We are going to have to understand that we do everything in good character and good conduct. And we do everything in line with a set of standards. We have no standards. Someone's got to lift up a standard. And when the standards go out the window, then it's every man for himself. But remember, there is no individual pronoun I or me. It's only us and we. What we do will affect us as a unit. And we've got to be careful of how we display ourselves. And we've got to be careful of what messages we're sending across the airwaves. And it's so vital now that we get a better understanding, because a lot of us are challenging the court systems. We're going in the court of law and we're talking about our rights, our Constitution. Most of your laws are based on the Constitution, but when you're not a citizen, you cannot classify yourself under the Constitution because you're outside of it as a Black person of color. And when they put this name Black on us, the name Black only says that we're outside of the court of law, and that Black has no standing in the court of law, and that there is no amount of laws that the white person is able to acknowledge that the Black person has. So we've got to do this whole thing over again. We've got to re-examine our own judicial system and see if we're operating in the common law. Are they functioning in the common law with us? Are they functioning under maritime? Admiral maritime, as if they were on the sea. Well, we're not on the sea, we're on land. And why are the sheriffs and the policemen operating on a maritime, an admiral maritime basis? So you must understand that the policemen have to be appointed and the sheriffs have to actually be polled in through a vote. Even our political system is turned backwards and not functioning like it should be. But we have to understand that we're forced under a bankruptcy. And we're bankrupt already with our morality, but we're forced under a bankruptcy. And now we're talking about our Social Security card and talking about our birth certificate having funds there. It's another whole category that someone will be speaking on, I'm sure, to talk more about what is the actual trustees all about. And how does that affect our nationality? Well, I'm not going to speak on nationality today because we have to be naturalized for that. I'm only speaking on correcting our status. And our status is naturalization. Are we a naturalized citizen? That is a question for you. One of the things I'm saying is that we can look at our character. And once we get our character in place, then we can look at naturalizing ourselves so that we are in our right natural status. And how are we being perceived? Are we being perceived as a person without a naturalization? And are some people coming in this country from other countries who are naturalized and we are not? Now look at Africa stepping in. Ghana is stepping in. offering over 34 people a chance to come into their country and possibly gain a dual citizenship. I'm not certain. But the real thing we must look at is that we are going to have to start adjusting things for the better for ourselves. They're going to have to be able to look at us and tell what our character is by the way we govern ourselves around each other. And we cannot go around here living any old kind of shabby life without a standard. Somebody has to lift up a standard. And when that standard is lifted up, we will be able to talk about how we can present ourselves as a better people. Mothers who are having babies frequently without knowing the father's last name or name will have to govern themselves better. And those husbands who've left their wives will have to go get their wives and reunite themselves to their wives and to become a part of an institution again. And we, in our communities with our children are going to have to function better in these schools, and they're going to have to come correctly as if they want to have learning knowledge. I know that a lot of children feel they're being miseducated. Yes, some of the schools are miseducated. Yes, some of the teachers are acting out. But we got to get them in order too. But we've got to also look at correcting status in the school system and in the home. Are the children out of line? Are the children governing themselves? Are they listening to what the parents say? Parent, are you laying down the foundation of the rules and are you reinforcing them? We've got to look at co-parenting. Fathers, are you coming back to the women that you birthed children through, and are you assisting them in governing their male child? And are you a part of governing the children? And do you activate your co-parenting license to come into the home to work with the parent? Mothers, are you physically overwhelmed? And are you taking advantage of children by abusing them and then causing the system to come in to take your children out of the home? All these things are inappropriate persona. And when we go into a court of law, we ask to present our case in inappropriate persona, not in pro se. Because pro se is saying that you are consenting to the court system's procedure. Inappropriate persona would allow you to come in your own vessel and to present your case while you're in your own vessel and you have not abandoned your vessel and you want to be seen as an individual and as flesh and blood, as a spirit. Now, we've got to understand some of the laws. We've got to understand case law. We got to understand prima facie cases. We got to read up on bankruptcy. What in detail bankruptcy? How do we know we should file bankruptcy? How to be in right standing so that we're not fraudulently frauding the government. So these things have to be talked about, and our judicial system has to be set up where we can actually govern ourselves in our own judicial system. And we cannot be out of order and having someone else to come in and govern us. We've got to understand that when we are vacating our vessel, then someone has to come in and govern us. And we don't want to fall lower than a refugee. I want to understand that we're coming into consciousness. And how can a people than a refugee? And how can a people who went up into the Caucasus Mountains and freed those who were crawling around on all four legs and showed them how to walk upright and showed them how to have a consciousness of equality and equity in their lives be gone so bad? How can the people that once sat on the throne that governed in duality now disfavors the constitution of marriage? How can a people no longer look at marriage as honorable? How can a people that once followed the ways of their ancestors, went far back into themselves and call on their ancestors as far back as they can go and say, ancestors, show us the way. and give us Iwa Pelu. Show us how to have character and good moral judgment. Show us how to discipline ourselves under the auspices of equity and building equity in our vessels. How do we not vacate our vessels so that we are morally and just people? Ancestors, show us the way, give us the way, make the way open and clear for us. How is it that a people that once gave morality to the world now have forgotten how morality works? How is it that a woman who fed the nation off of her mammary glands and who all civilization came down through her womb, how is it that she is now birthing children that she knows nothing about or has no interest in? How is it that this woman can give away a child that she's carried for 9 months? How is it that we've lost ourselves? We've lost sight of who we are. We must come back to ourselves, and we must realize that we are accountable for our character and our conduct. We must realize that we cannot go in the courtroom immorally corrupted. We must go in there with just behavior and know that the governing judicial system will not lay hands on us because we've taken offense to their immoral conduct and character, and that they must look at our character as a prime example in light of who they should have been and show the world that they cannot strike down a morally unjust individual, that they cannot take away this vessel's standing because they are spiritually flesh and blood and are correct. How is it that a people that knew right from wrong and who were the callers to prayer, who went out in the courtyard and called everyone to prayer, now have forgotten their prayers and no longer call on their higher self to direct their lives? We've got to do better, people. We've got to correct our status by starting with ourselves. Each individual look in the mirror and see what we can change and what we can do to make our world a better place to live in, to make our position a better character. So many women who are desiring a husband, but who are giving out the wrong message that they are morally unjust, who are exploiting themselves to a point of revealing all of their continence. How is it that a woman who wants to be partnered with a male who wants to have a male find her in good standing, find herself to be corrupted? And who corrupted her? Who has corrupted the woman? And what must the woman do to get back in right standing? She must first of all value herself and value her continence, and don't lower herself to a low standard and give herself over to a morally incorrupt man. She must respect herself. But it's very vital that we only have a little time to do this before we are to rule again, because Africa is already looking to get some of us to come there to their continent. I don't know if this is a ploy. I don't know if this is a conning situation to get us to come back there to only lock us up and put us in slavery. I don't know if this to put us in right standing so we can go there and live a righteous life. I just don't know. But I do know that we've got to be about the business of correcting our status so we'll have naturalization naturally through the way we conduct our conduct in business. We must not conduct our conduct in business through lying, cheating, and covering people's things. We must not say one thing and speak out of our mouth with another thing. We must be morally conscious and not corrupted in our morals, and our scrupulous must be high. We must have high scruples and don't just do anything for money. Money is not the ultimate all, and we must not lay down our lives and our moral for a body of money that has no value. I don't care how rich you are and how much money you gain to lock away in banks or vaults. You will become morally bankrupt and broke if you continue to throw away your morals and your equality of your scruples. You must keep your morals high. And ladies, you must not be the talk of the town, but one who esteems you, and be like the Shunammite woman, believing for things she can't see. God will give you some money. God will provide for you. You don't have to become corrupted to take money. But we must put money in its proper place. The actual dollar bill is no longer going to carry any weight, and we will have to start putting weight on other things. Why not put the weight on ourselves? Put the weight on ourselves so that we can make a difference in carrying ourselves in a better pilot, because we truly are going to have to set the example, and we are going to have to be the moral standard and moral consciousness that the world is governed by. They've governed us by a corrupted, immoral world, and we're going to have to be the moral standards for the world to govern the African American by, and then they will see that we are in right standing with good character, good conduct, and Iwa Pelu. Thank you so much for listening, and I trust that you gain how to correct your moral status and how to correct your status and put yourself in right standing. Thank you. Adabo.